Hey, MSA community and families, I'm Jimmy O'Brien,
I'm Marissa Eck.
And I'm Aisha Lee.
and we're here to review with you the next Behavior Beacon newsletter. So before we get started, I guess what we want to first discuss with you guys that what the purpose again of these newsletters moving forward are, and in keeping with our mission and values, where we want to educate and support and empower our learners, we also want to do the same thing with you guys. We want to educate and empower you also to the science of applied behavior analysis, because as the behavior service team, we feel that applied behavior analysis is a great science. And one of the things, it's public, meaning there's no magic here. There's no magic wand that we can wave. These are based upon time and true basic principles of behavior. We also believe, above all, it's realistic and it's optimistic. So our goal here is to introduce you to some of the more simpler principles. So in order for us to talk about complex issues, it will be helpful to understand the simplistic versions. And above all, when we want to change other people's behavior, the way we do that is by changing our own. So no matter what we talk about, whether it's your learner or your significant other or the people around you, the way to change someone else's behavior is by looking at your own. So we hope that as these newsletters come out, we'll take you through some of the basic bare bones minimum necessary principles. So let's start with this newsletter with behavior. So what is it that we mean when we say the word behavior? Well, in its simplest terms, behavior is what anyone says or does. That is it. Think about that for a minute. And yes, when we say think, we also mean behavior. We determine what someone does, not by how we label things, but by the very actions of what they do. So for example, if you think about some of the things, the way we describe what people do, those are usually descriptions. We might say someone is mad. We might say someone is upset. We might say someone engaged in a tantrum. They have a bad attitude. And if you really think about that, the way that we confirm those things or those labels is by the very nature of what people say or do. So how would I describe Aisha if she had a bad attitude? Well, she might cross her arms. When I speak to her, she might roll her eyes. When I ask her a question, she might take a long time to respond. Or if I asked Marissa a question, she might say it in a more negative tone. Again, anything that we describe is usually based upon what people say or do in its simplest form. Just one last thing. So as we move forward, what we want you guys to do as we go through this incredible time is start to think about your learners, about your children, and what is it that they might say or do, either in excess, way too much they might do something, or in a deficit, meaning they might not do as much or they might not do it all. And what we're going to try to do is operationalize or describe for you what it is that your learners might say or do that we can help with. So I'm going to pass it off to Aisha. She's going to briefly talk about some of the misconceptions when we talk about behavior.
All right. Well, when we're talking about misconceptions of behavior, most people typically think that the word behavior means something bad. And you would typically hear something like Marissa had a behavior problem today, or Jimmy had no behaviors today. And what people are actually referring to is that there were no tantrums or things that their child did that they viewed as problematic. So the key word here is that it's something the child either said or that they did. And to always remember that behavior is something that can be observed. I'm going to pass it over to Marissa, and she's going to discuss the now what.
All right, everyone. So now that we've thrown some new things at you, I think what ideally we would like you guys to be thinking about is what to do with it now. So there's this really awesome quote by Wayne Dyer that says, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. And so we're encouraging you guys to look at your children, look at your significant other, look at yourself, and note all the behaviors that you or they might be engaging in under particular times. Do they do something more often than not, less often than not, or not at all? I'm sure that many of your concerns with your children or significant others is that they might be doing something too much, or they might be doing something not enough at all, or they just don't do it at all. In later newsletters, we're going to address why that might be. So in other words, what are the factors or reasons why our students or we as humans do something relative to others?
Okay, so
I'm going to pass it to Jimmy. Go for it.
So I'll finish it up with what you can do now or your tip of the week. So what we'd like you guys to do is take this crazy time as an opportunity to think objectively about the people around you and even yourself. In other words, think about all the things that one might say or do and be kind of like what we would call a strategic scientist or an inquisitive thinker. What is it that your learner or your significant other or even yourself might do that you do way too often or not as much or not at all? What we're going to talk about in our next newsletter is the reasons why we might do something more often than not. We'll talk about reasons why we might not do something as much, or we'll also talk about why you might not even do it at all. In other words, we'll talk about the reasons why we do what we do. So I hope you find this helpful. Please, above all things, as we go through this time, make sure that you take time to take care of yourself. If possible, reach out to us at our information is at the bottom. We sent our phone numbers and our Zoom numbers. Please reach out to us. We are here waiting to help you in any way possible. There's no task that is too small. So I'm going to be signing off. I'm Jimmy O'Brien.
Marissa Eck.
And Aisha Lee.
Be well. Be safe. Bye.